In D&D, the world of Eberron has an interesting cosmology. The entire setting takes place on Eberron, which is the planet, a ringed planet in fact, with a yellow ring around it known as the Ring of Sybaris. Orbiting around that planet are 12 different moons. Now that's a really large number of moons, but what's more interesting about them is that they all seem to be linked in some metaphysical way with the various planes of existence in Eberron. But what this means is that whenever a moon is in its closest, most coterminous orbit with the planet, regional effects caused by that plane the moon is linked to may begin to appear on the planet's surface. For example, if Sephiros, the moon linked to the plane of Undeath, Mabar, is coterminous with the planet of Eberron, the plane of Undeath is strengthened. Undead may begin to appear more prevalent, malevolent shadows can attack people in the night, and necromancers might find their magic strengthened as long as the moon is in that very close orbit with the planet. It's just the way that these moons are linked with the planes, and the way that can kind of spill over into tangential power. It should be noted that this is a natural cycle, and it's been happening regularly since the dawn of time. It's something people expect to happen. Each of the moons will get their turn being coterminous, and many of them bring boons to the people of Eberron as well. The moon of Larvion, for example, the moon linked to the plane of nature, might bring bountiful harvests for as long as it hangs coterminous in the sky. The moons themselves are a bit of a mystery in Eberron, and no one in the world quite knows why they act this way. Some people within the world theorize that the moons are aspects of the plane itself that broke into space as celestial objects. Others claim that the moons we see in the sky only appear like spherical objects because what they actually are giant portals. And they say that if anyone were to actually attempt to land on one of these moons, they might just fall into the plane it's linked with instead. Whatever the true nature of Eberron's moons might be, what's important to note here is that metaphysical link between each plane and its associated moon in the sky. They're inseparably linked. Now the interesting thing here is that there are 12 moons, but there are 13 planes. And if each moon has a representative plane, then how can those numbers not match up? If Eberron has 13 planes but only 12 moons, then where's this lost 13th moon? What happened to the moon of the plane of dreams? As we've stated, Eberron has 13 planes. Each plane represents a concept, like war or order or fire. The 13th of those planes is Delcor, the plane of dreams. When sleeping creatures in Eberron have dreams at night, they're literally having dreams in Delcor. It's the space in which dreams actually exist. However, that's just about the only time anyone ever interacts with the plane at all. The plane has these limitations, and it's strangely detached compared to how the other planes work. For example, if you were to try to go to Delcor by casting Plane Shift, for example, the spell would literally fail. The normal methods that you'd use to reach any other plane simply don't work here, as if the plane itself is in some kind of distant exile. So given the strange way that the plane acts and the fact that we don't see a moon associated with it, is it possible that these ideas are linked? Is it possible that without a planar moon to anchor it, the plane is weakened? Well, what we do know is that there did used to be a 13th moon there. So where did that moon go, and when did it vanish? Moreover, creatures live in this plane too, in the plane of dreams. There's immortal dream spirits native to the plane called the Quori. What effect did this have on them when the moon got separated? Well, to understand this, we have to actually go back tens of thousands of years in Eberron's history, on the distant continent of Xen'drik, where a lot of this went down. Long ago, Xen'drik was the home of the giants. Several really powerful giant empires existed on this continent and ruled it for thousands of years. They'd learned their magic from the dragons, mastered elemental binding, and had raided the plains of the Fae and made slaves of the elves that lived there. Their rule in Xen'drik was oppressive and cruel, but it was unchallenged. That is, until their war with the Quori. Dragons of Eberron tells us, then the Quori came to Xen'drik. The motivation for this extraplanar incursion remains a mystery, but the Giants' records portray the Quori simply as ruthless invaders. Other evidence suggests that the Quori merely sought refuge from a disaster on their own plane, or even retaliation against acts of aggression instigated by the Lords of Xen'drik. Whatever the root of this war, it was a struggle that lasted for centuries. Powerful mystical and psionic forces were unleashed by both sides, and, in time, nearly all the arcane knowledge the Giants possessed was turned to the war effort. Now, this war went on for a long time with devastating consequences on both sides. The Quori had unique ways of waging war using psionics, and the Giants were not really prepared for that. And for a time at least, the Quori had them on their heels, this massive, unstoppable giant empire. And eventually, the Giants got desperate. The outcome is known to any student of history. The Giants unleashed forces that tore Delcor from its orbit, bringing a sudden and terrible end to the conflict. The Giants' gambit devastated their continent and shook the foundations of Eberron. So the Giants used some kind of magic or super weapon that was able to literally expel one of Eberron's moons from its orbit to the point where we don't even know where it is today. And by doing this to the moon that represented the plane of dreams, they were able to cut off the Quori, these spirits from that plane, off from their home. And nearly all of the Quori's power was lost in an instant. Furthermore, it shook the foundations of magic in the world itself to the point where it actually began to destabilize the Empire. And the consequences of this action, of the choice to shoot one of Eberron's moons out of the sky, it's hard to overstate just how influential this was to Eberron's history. The shockwaves of this event would be felt for thousands of years to come. On Xen'drik, the Giants found themselves backed into a corner. Their former slaves, the Elves, rose up against their weakened masters. Desperate, the Giants began to harness the power once more, preparing to unleash the same forces that had vanquished Delcor. Perhaps they thought victory was possible, but many historians believe it was pure nihilism. If the Titans couldn't rule the world, they would destroy it. So the Giants, hot off the heel of destroying a moon with a superweapon, were preparing to use that same superweapon against an elvish slave revolt. It was obvious overkill. So it was then that the dragons finally took notice. After all, it was the dragons who had taught the Giants much of the magic that they knew to begin with. It was the dragons that had allowed the giant empire to thrive in the way that it had. In a way, they were responsible for this, and they took decisive action in response. Dragons of Eberron tells us what happened. Shocked and alarmed at the effect of the forces already unleashed by the Giants, this time the dragons chose to act. A scaled army poured forth from Argonesson, with flights of all colors led by the militant worms of the Light of Sybaris. The conflict was brutal, and its outcome never in doubt. The dragons had no interest in holding territory. They made no effort to avoid civilian casualties. They brought fire, fang, and epic magic to bear in the most destructive ways imaginable. In the end, nothing was left of the proud nations of Xen'drik. Giant, elf, and all other cultures of the land were laid low by the dragons, and powerful curses ensured that the Giants would never again threaten the world. Their mission accomplished, the dragons returned to Argonesson to brood. All agreed that the people of Xen'drik would never have posed such a threat if the dragons had not shared the secrets of magic. The Conclave forbade any flight from sharing the secrets of Argonesson with lesser beings again. The destruction of the 13th moon was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back with the dragons. They used it as justification to not just annihilate the empire of giants, but the entire continent that they practiced their magic on. This destruction would have large ramifications not only for the Giants but for the Elves, who had just been on the cusp of winning their freedom from the Giants when the dragons obliterated them. This would cause centuries of bad blood between the Elves and the dragon that still exists today. The continent of Xen'drik was forever scarred by the event as well. The Traveler's Curse, which the dragon's magic has come to be called, makes navigation on Xen'drik incredibly difficult, and seems to grant bad luck to any civilization that tries to settle on the continent. Nearly every culture that's tried to start a colony on Xen'drik has failed and ended with horrible disaster. So as we can see, this event shaped the history of not only an entire continent, but the histories of many different cultures of people in Eberron as well. And the Quori, the dream spirits that live there? Well, it seems like their plane being expelled from its natural orbit around Eberron might have had negative consequences for the inhabitants of Delcor as well. Although it remains a distinct possibility that the Quori of the Age of Giants hadn't started their war with malicious intent, what is clear is that these ethereal dream spirits took a dark turn for the worse afterwards. The Quori, with their influence on the world broken, were dormant for a very long time, but eventually did emerge again, this time on the continent of Sarlona. Sarlona is another ancient continent, the birthplace of humanity before their migration over to the main continent of Corvair. It's widely believed to be one of the oldest places in Eberron, dotted with dragon and Quattle ruins. At a point in history, the continent was made up of 12 different nations, all existing with their own separate cultures and ways of living life. It was in one of these nations, the mountainous region of Adar, that the Quori would re-emerge. Secrets of Sarlona tells us, 1800 years ago, on a date immortalized as 1 Age of Teratai, Adar received its strangest visitors. Spirits fleeing from the plane of dreams seeking human hosts. A group of monks agreed to provide shelter for these spirits, and the Kalashtar race was born from this union. These Quori who came to the Kalashtar were rebels. These were Quori spirits who recognized that an unnatural darkness, a desire to dominate, had taken hold of their home plane. These dark Quori had theorized that by controlling the minds of others, by controlling the minds of everyone in the world, they might control their dreams as well. and by doing so stabilize the plane of Delcor and prevent another calamity like the one they had suffered from the giants. The rebel Quori who came to the Kalashtar came to warn them, but they were too late. The Quori were planning to dominate the entire continent of Sarlona, and that would only be the beginning. Their dark plans would be brought to fruition in an event in Sarlona known as the Sundering. Using psionics and dream manipulation, the Quori were able to throw the 12 nations of Sarlona into chaos, a chaos without any obvious cause at first. Now, this was the most effective way for these Quori to interact with the material plane, by interacting with dreams and with psychic energy. Now, the rebel Quori, the ones who had gone to the Kalashtar, were able to interact with the material plane by giving up their individuality, giving up part of their power, in order to form a symbiosis with those on the material plane. The Quori attempting this takeover were not prepared to sacrifice their power and individuality in the same way, and this prevented them from directly taking hosts in the way that the Kalashtar Quori had. But what they could do is manipulate mortals through their dreams and through psychic energy. They could give a paranoid king nightmares of a conspiracy leading him to persecute his own people. Then, afterwards, they could send a charismatic hero visions of justice, urging them to rise up against this tyrannical king. A charismatic hero they had manipulated and controlled to a point of reliability, allowing this hero to both feel like they were the good guy and be worshipped as the good guy by those under him, while secretly being controlled by the Quori the entire time. So the Quori are playing a delicate game here. They aren't just trying to subjugate people, they're trying to trick them into subjugating themselves. By manipulating one actor to commit an atrocity and another actor to stop that atrocity, they're creating their own heroes. Now the Quori have a ruler in charge who's already perfectly molded to be influenced. They're creating trust. They're getting people to give up their freedoms willingly for the sake of security. And they're doing this all while keeping their hands completely clean. Rising from the Last War tells us, the ultimate goal of the Dreaming Dark is to control all of the nations of the world. The plane of Delcor goes through cycles of light and darkness, and the current age is coming to an end. The nightmare spirits that rule the plane believe that seizing control of mortal civilization, by forcing all the people of Eberron to dream the dreams they devise, they can maintain this current age of darkness indefinitely. So the fiends of the Dreaming Dark aren't merely hungry for power, they're fighting for survival. This is what the Quori are like today, and it does seem to support that narrative that the Giants suggested that paints the Quori as ruthless and insidious invaders. Is that the whole story? If the Quori fear this turning of the age, then what does that actually mean? What happens to the Quori when the Plane of Dreams begins a new cycle? If this current age is an age of the Dreaming Dark, then is what comes next an age of light? Evidence to some of these questions may exist, once again on the continent of Xen'drik. In Xen'drik, there is a docent that calls itself Shira, and she claims to be one of the last survivors of the giant Quori war all those years ago. And Shira tells us a very different tale of what the Quori really used to be like. Shira, in Secrets of Xen'drik, says, "My thoughts are crystal and light, and they do not fade with the passage of time. Nations have risen and fallen while I have lain in my coffin of steel. Delcor is forever lost, and what remains is a twisted abomination. Believe what you will, but the Quori came to this world in search of salvation, not conquest. It was the denizens of this land, the Sulat League, the Group of 11, the Emperor Kulsir, who brought this war upon us and ultimately destroyed both of our worlds. I am all that remains of the Dreaming Heart, the last spark of light in this new age of darkness. And you're not ready to hear the tale I have to tell." Now, Shira suggests that it's only because that her soul is being kept inside of the docent that she survived the previous turning of the age. The Quori of her plane, except for perhaps the rebels that would flee to the Kalashtar, had fallen to evil as the age turned to one of darkness. Now, this would suggest that if the age were to turn again, the Dreaming Dark might flip once again into creatures of light. The Kalashtar hold a similar belief. In the Path of Light, the Kalashtar religion, it's said that through shared cooperation and goodwill, they might turn Delcor to an age of light. So both the Dreaming Dark and the Kalashtar believe that Delcor can change once again into a place of light and hope and good dreams. Both of them believe that to be how it works. They just have different directions that they're trying to push the pendulum. Tying all these things back together, we can try to link this back to the Lost Moon. Now, it remains entirely possible that the Quori of the Giants' Age were in fact as malevolent as the Dreaming Dark that we know today. It's definitely possible that Shira could be smoothing out parts of the truth that she's telling us in order to fit her own narrative. But if a turning of the age did happen back then, it was likely caused when the Giants dislodged the moon of Sira, the moon representing the Plane of Dreams, from orbit. Now, this could have transformed innocent dream spirits simply trying to interact with the material world into creatures of nightmare. And this is purely speculation using Shira as our primary source, but if it is true, then perhaps finding a way to restore Eberron's lost moon could help the Quori turn their age for the better. Perhaps the Kalashtar are right, and that if we simply work together to heal our collective unconsciousness, love and respect each other, then we can end this age of darkness and heal the world.